What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. And once again, what an incredible new blend of Nerd Tees that I have to tell you about today. And welcome to week 5 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL regular season and postseason. And this is me kind of pulling the old Vince Russo double swerve on you, because I posted on Twitter, I believe it was earlier today, that I was going to push the week 5 episode to tomorrow. Even though that was going to be a little more difficult with my work schedule, I just felt like, you know what, we're on the tail end of another bad week. Like, don't go before you're ready to go, if that makes sense. But, you know, I sat down today, I started working through the games and what happened last week, and I landed on a lot of spots and a lot of lines that I really like. And I thought, you know what? I'm not afraid of this, so I'm ready to fire. I feel good, so we're going to go ahead and fire. And look, I kind of put the cart before the horse here a little bit. It was another bad week in week 4. Second straight bad week, third bad week in the first 4 weeks. What I think kind of sets me apart from other people that do this, I'm not going to come on here and make excuses. I'm not going to come on here and pretend that the first month of the season hasn't happened, because it certainly has. And I like and respect my audience a lot more than to sit here and lie to you. So yeah, it's been 3 bad weeks out of 4. And you'll notice I'm not wearing a CFL shirt this week, because quite frankly, your boy doesn't deserve to wear a CFL shirt with how badly the first month of the season has gone. But I put it in the thumbnail of last week's video for a reason. The only way out is through. We're going to get through this cold snap by going through it together. We're going to get out of it by going through. That's all we can do, and that's what we're going to do right now. So yeah, last week, once again, awful. I tried to manifest 6-3. Instead, I manifested 2-7 last week. Just absolutely brutal in a short week. 1-2 straight up, 1-2 against the spread. And I don't know how unlucky you would have to be to lose 7 consecutive coin flips, but I'm 0-7 on my last 7 totals. Like, look, it's over 40% of what I've given up in the last 2 weeks, and over 40% of what I've given up on the season. All we can do is dig deep and try to turn it around. 7-8 straight up and 7-8 against the spread so far on the season, and abysmal 3-12 on the totals. Like, if you faded every single total I've given you this year, send me some of that money. Had a fairly decent little week in CFL fantasy. Certainly was not anywhere near the car wreck that my actual picks were. Week 4 brought in 83.9 points, good for 2,400th in the game overall, and 208 in Derek Taylor's league. And on the season, 397.9. There were a couple of stat adjustments from previous weeks. Number 504 overall in the game on the season. And number 69, nice, in Derek Taylor's league. So I'm right where I want to be in both of those regards. I'm still right around the top 500, doing well in Derek Taylor's league. Obviously, we want to keep moving forward in fantasy, but I'm at a comfortable spot right now. Shout out to my most outstanding player from week 4, Ottawa running back Demontre Tuggle, who was my value play, quote unquote, at running back, and he wound up being the best player that I rolled out last week. 17 carries for $132 on the ground and a rushing touchdown. He added 6 yards on a single reception. Good for 20.2 points. And like, he even outperformed my quarterback. Like, Zach Collaros only put up, I think, 11 something. It wound up being 22 something because he was my captain. Once again, you know what we're going to have to do with fantasy, since the folks at Genius Sports and the folks who run CFL Fantasy don't have the teams readily available yet, because it is only Tuesday and, the week only ended, yesterday. Which means we'll kick right into our full slate of 4 games for this week. We start with the Edmonton Elks on the road in Saskatchewan. Calgary is in Winnipeg taking on the Blue Bombers. Ottawa is in Hamilton taking on the Ticats. Super interesting quarterback news coming out of that game. And Montreal travels to BC to take on the Lions. The Argos are on bye this week. It's their second bye already in this young season. All right, let's start in Saskatchewan, where the Edmonton Elks are in town. The Elks are going to be on the tail end of back-to-back road games here, visiting a Riders team coming off of their bye. Now, look, karma came rolling in for the Edmonton Elks last week, as far as I'm concerned. They benched Taylor Cornelius. I went on record on this episode last week saying that I didn't think that was just. I thought it was a bad idea to bench Taylor Cornelius. And look what happens. Jared Daig tossing up 3 interceptions in a 3-possession loss for the Elks last week. And they're going to turn right around and go back to Taylor Cornelius this week. And we've seen this now for the last couple of seasons. A team that's bad just flip-flopping at quarterback. Like, just not able to really sit down and commit to one of their quarterbacks. And I don't know why the teams continue to do it, because it does not end well. Cornelius was not hurt. There's no reason that he didn't play last week. The Elks' run defense got torched last week for 208 rushing yards by the REDBLACKS, including, of course, that 126 yards rushing to Demontre Tuggle. They are now allowing a league-worst 164 rushing yards per game. The next worst is Hamilton, who's allowing 113. So Edmonton is in a class all by themselves here in terms of inefficiency stopping the run on defense. But it wasn't all gloom and doom for the Elks. Shout out to wide receiver Maurice French. That's with 2 F's. Thank you very much. Maurice French, his first CFL touchdown, his first professional touchdown, in fact, catching 6 balls for 74 yards and that TUD in his CFL debut. Big shout out to that guy. Great job. For the home squad, the Riders come in off of their bye after a 3-point overtime win in Calgary 2 weeks ago, where Jamal Morrow finally arrived. He touched the ball 24 times, put up 139 all-purpose yards. He really paced that offense, and the defense picking off Jake Maier 3 times. Critical plays in that game, and it brought the Riders to a win. Their second kind of cardiac win early on in this season. It was, in fact, the second time in 3 games where the Riders have won on opportunism and late-game heroics. Remember, you go all the way back to week 1. It took a goal line stand against the Edmonton Elks for Saskatchewan to secure that win. It's not a sustainable way to play football. It's definitely exciting, but we can't let that excitement distract us from the fact that the Riders blew a 10-point lead in the 4th quarter in that game. That game probably never should have gone to overtime. Calgary forced that game to go to overtime, and Saskatchewan let them do it. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, even though people are talking about the Riders as if they're like, I don't know, the 4th best team in this league. I don't see that yet. The Riders did allow 3 more quarterback sacks to Trevor Harris in that game. They've allowed 8 in their 3 games so far this year, which it's not a problem yet. It's less than 3 a game, but I think every veteran athlete, every veteran football player, certainly every veteran quarterback would tell you to steal a term from professional wrestling, that they have a bump card. They only have so many hits that they can take, especially the longer you've been playing the game. The Riders are playing a team in the Elks that do not have a great pass rush. So this is one of those opportunities. What I want to see from the Riders O-line in this game is a clean slate. No quarterback sacks. That's going to go a long way to keeping Trevor Harris healthy and effective as the season rolls on. I want to see a clean slate from the Riders O-line this week. The Riders will be without Jake Winnipeg this week, which is a bit of a hit to them on the offensive side, but it's supposed to be ideal weather conditions. They're against a bad team on the tail end of back-to-back road games. We're going to grab the Riders here. It's a great spot for them at home. Riders get the win over the Elks. Now on the line, Saskatchewan's laying 7.5 points. It feels like a big line, but honestly, this smells like a blowout spot here, and I'm making it a personal victory lap of mine for a couple of CFL coaches to get fired. And you're going to know which ones I'm talking about. I've talked about them already this season. One of them is in this game. So I think a blowout loss against a team that you almost beat in week 1 might just be the ticket to seeing him out of there. It's not Taylor Cornelius' fault. It's not the player's fault. I have no confidence in them right now. So we're going to go ahead, not only take the Riders to win that game straight up, let's lay those 7.5 points. Let's see a big statement win here for Sasky. Total in the game set at 42.5. Here we go, totals. This feels like an over to me because Edmonton's scoring defense is not very good. I think Saskatchewan's going to be able to run the ball down their throat. Their pass offense still tends to be fairly good. I'm going to go with the over here. It's such a beatable number. Over 42.5 points in Edmonton, Saskatchewan. Let's go Riders 31, Elks 20. Riders get a statement double-digit win. Give me the over. Lay the 7.5. And let's go to Winnipeg now for the Bombers playing host to the Calgary Stampeders. And for Calgary, they dropped that aforementioned 3-point overtime game at home 2 weeks ago to the Riders. They probably played well enough to win that game, if we're being perfectly honest, with the very notable exception of far too many mistakes at the quarterback position. That was what buried them in that game. Much like Jamal Morrow, I want to see Dedrick Mills become more active in the pass game. I think Jamal Morrow has only caught a couple of passes this year. Dedrick Mills, I believe, has only caught 2, and they both happened last week. I want to see Mills more involved in the pass game. Be that Kadeem Carey 2.0, that Kadeem Jr. That's a big part of why Kadeem Carey is so effective. A mixed bag of news on the injury front for the Stamps. Reggie Begelton likely returns to their receiving core this week, but with Malik Henry out for the season after rupturing his Achilles last week, it's time, really now time for the likes of Trey Odoms-Dukes, who's had a good start to this season, and Luther Hukunavanu, who unfortunately is questionable coming into this game. Don't know whether he plays this week or not, but with the absence of Malik Henry, who is an all-star wide receiver in this league, those types of players really need to turn around and really need to step up. Trey Odoms-Dukes has been doing that so far this year. I need to see it from Luther Hukunavanu once he's healthy. For Winnipeg, we can say the Bombers are officially back on track after a defensive gem in soggy conditions last week, a 17-3 win over Montreal, where they held the Owls scoreless until the final 7 minutes of that football game, generating 4 turnovers, 3 forced fumbles, and a pick. Now, despite that performance, the defensive problems do still persist, especially in the secondary. They did allow 2 100-yard receivers in that game, those being Austin Mack and Kyan Julian Grant. But once again, and we've seen this from the Bombers' defense for the last couple of seasons, they bend, but they don't break. I think games like this do highlight one of Zach Collaros' biggest limitations, and that's as a runner, in that he basically isn't one. A game like that where yardage through the air and your ability to complete passes is a little reduced because of the weather conditions. You'd love to have a quarterback back there that's a little more mobile, a little more dangerous as a runner. Collaros doesn't really have that in his repertoire anymore, but he does spread the ball around. He spread the ball to 7 different receivers in that game. Even in poor passing conditions, it goes to highlight how incredible of a passing quarterback Zach Collaros really is. Probably the best the CFL has to offer at this point. So it does highlight one of his limitations, but it can also help show just how good he is. Kind of like the game last week, there's about a 50-50 chance of rain at IG Field on Friday, mixed with 2 of the better scoring defenses in the CFL this year. Winnipeg's got problems in the secondary, but in terms of allowing points on the board, these are still two of the best scoring defenses in the CFL. I think this is a game where points are going to be at a premium, and in a matchup like that, I just plain don't trust Jake Maier to go out and win this game. So with that in mind, even though Calgary are coming into this game fresh off of the bye from last week, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Blue Bombers here at home to get another win early in the season. Winnipeg gets the win over Calgary. However, given that there is the possibility here of some, 50-50 conditions, not great, maybe an emphasis on the run game, 2 very good run defenses, the lines here are just not quite what I'm looking for. So Winnipeg is favored in this game by 8.5 points. Bombers minus 8.5. I get where that's coming from. I really do. 8.5 points is too many in this matchup with two pretty comparable defenses and conditions that might make scoring points a little harder than it would normally be. 8.5 here is just way too many for me. I'm going to hedge my bets, and I'm going to take Calgary plus the 8.5 points. Total in the game set at 46.5. Once again, you kind of know where I'm going to go with this. I think points are going to be at a premium here based on the conditions. We're going to stick under the 46.5 point total, despite the fact that Winnipeg is scoring very well, or certainly scored very well early in the season. Kind of back-to-back games here where they haven't done that. So we're going to stick under 46.5 points. Let's go 23-17. Winnipeg wins. Calgary covers the plus 8.5. And give me the under on the points. Halfway point of the episode, and as always, I'm going to take this opportunity to shout out my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca is exactly where you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea and coffee blends, estate coffees, flavored coffees, all kinds of wonderfulness. You need to go to nerdtees.ca and you need to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, and you're going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar for my American viewers and friends. And one of those great dozens and dozens of blends is a brand new one that we're trying here, Cabana Banana. And when I tell you, when I opened this bag, I didn't even have to lean in to smell this. The second I opened the bag, flavoring of like banana and apple and just a tropical paradise came out of this bag. It smelled so good. It smells so good brewed. It tastes so good brewed. And it's just one of a ton of incredible options for you at nerdtees.ca. Nerdtees.ca is where you need to go. Use my promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Back half of the week time now, and we are going to go to Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, where the Ticats are going to play host to the Ottawa REDBLACKS. Now, Ottawa cannot help but feel good coming off of a 3-possession win that had a strong showing on every single side of the ball. Every facet of this game, Ottawa was good at, and they were the better team between the two. Tyree Adams, clean game at the quarterback position, 70% completion percentage, only 185 yards, threw a touchdown, did not throw a pick, added 31 yards on 3 carries on the ground, completed passes to 8 different receivers, which is exceptionally important for the young quarterbacks out there. Do not be predictable. Do not force the football to your number 1 or number 2 targets. You've got a bunch of targets out there. You got to make use of all of them. He did exactly that, did Tyree Adams in their game last week. And again, Demontre Tuggle, I've mentioned it a couple of times. He gets rewarded with a late rushing touchdown off of his 126 rush yard effort. A great showing there for him. And shout out to the REDBLACKS defense here too. They held the Elks to under 280 total yards, 3 interceptions off of Jarrett Daig, 4 quarterback sacks, which means they pressured the quarterback, which they've been doing all season long, and even the special teams coverage. Weirdly enough, think about this. The special teams coverage was great. They only allowed 68 yards of return yardage on 9 returns. Whether it was offensively, defensively, special teams, coaching, Ottawa was the best team on the field there, and they're going to take a lot of momentum into this game this week in Hamilton, where the Ticats are searching for answers. A 26-point drubbing at home by the Alouettes. Matthew Schiltz, who got the start, had 369 all-purpose yards. He had himself a pretty solid fantasy game, but a one-dimensional offense is exactly what Hamilton became. 47 pass attempts to just 9 carries. And look, I said on this show a little while back, Matthew Schiltz, as the starting quarterback, can sustain Hamilton's biggest weapons. Look at what Tim White and Duke Williams did in that game last week, combined for 12 catches for 245 yards. Those were 2 massive fantasy performances, but James Butler was completely nullified because they refused to run the ball. Butler touched the ball 8 times in that game for just 24 all-purpose yards. Not good enough. I understand game script plays into that. So obviously you're not running the ball a ton, but you got to at least try. What is that? That's 5-to-1 pass to run ratio. That's not going to work. Even in the CFL, that's not going to work. You still have to have the threat, or at least the presumed threat, that you might run the ball. And if you're not going to do that, you're one-dimensional, and it's really easy to play against you. And quite frankly, until this secondary figures it out, the Ticats can be beaten by anybody. Literally anybody in this league are capable of beating the Ticats if their secondary can't stop anybody. They are now allowing the second most yards on average through the air are the Ticats secondary, and the worst QBR against by like 30%. Like, it's not close. The QBR that they're allowing to opposing quarterbacks is massive. Like a Hall of Fame career QBR that the Ticats are allowing. If you can't stop the pass, you can't win in this league. Like I mentioned, massive quarterback news in this game. Jeremiah Masoli, this afternoon it came out that he was taking first team reps at practice, and before you knew it, wouldn't you know who won the pony? Jeremiah Masoli is back. He will be getting the start for the Ottawa REDBLACKS in this game against his former team. The story writes itself, obviously. This is the worst possible time for the Ticats, once again, like we just talked about, with a secondary that cannot stop anybody. It's leaking more by the week. And when you start thinking about this REDBLACKS team, the receiving core is what it is right now, but Shaq Evans is due back in a couple of weeks. Braylon Addison doesn't have a timeline as far as I know right now, but you get those two guys back and you got Jeremiah Masoli under center, you're going to be able to do some stuff offensively. And if this pass rush keeps going, Ottawa could make some noise in the East Division playoff race. Hamilton comes into this game as the betting favorites, and I do not understand it. Like, I guess I get it because they're the home team, but right now the Hamilton Ticats are not better than the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I'm going to take the Ottawa REDBLACKS to win this game outright. Jeremiah Masoli comes back. Like, you have to temper expectations for Masoli in his first start back, but I don't see why Ottawa doesn't win this football game outside of some weird shenanigans. So I'm going to grab the REDBLACKS here. REDBLACKS on the road to get the win outright. So obviously, since Hamilton's laying -3, I'm going to be very heavily on Ottawa +3 and Ottawa on the money line as the underdog to win the game outright. Total in the game set at 43.5. Now, neither one of these offenses are incredible right now in terms of scoring points, putting points on the board. But I want you to think about this. In Hamilton's games so far this season, they're allowing just themselves less than a touchdown less than what this total is. So this total is 43.5. I think they're allowing like 37 points a game or something like that. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you can't take an under here because do you trust Hamilton's defense to stop anybody? Because I certainly don't, much less, even though he hasn't thrown a pass in a game in a year, a super, super talented quarterback in Jeremiah Masoli. Got to take the over here as far as I'm concerned. Over 43.5 points in Ottawa. Hamilton, let's go REDBLACKS 27, Ticats 20. Their slide continues, and don't look now, but the REDBLACKS have something cooking. And the last game of the week sees the Montreal Alouettes traveling to BC Place to take on Vernon Adams and the BC Lions. Speaking of quarterbacks taking on their former teams, Vernon Adams taking on the Alouettes. Now, we'll talk about Vernon Adams in a second. The Alouettes dropped that 17-3 sloppy affair against Winnipeg last week, where the run defense gave up 177 yards, most of that, of course, to Brady Oliveira, and Cody Fajardo outduels William Stanback on the ground. That's not what you normally want to see. Fajardo had 6.7 yards per carry in that game to Stanback, who had 5.3. 5.3 is not bad. That's not bad at all. But when your quarterback gets about as much volume as your starting running back does and outperforms him, that's a problem. I think Montreal's outcome in that game is probably worthy of a bit of a mulligan given the weather conditions. Like, that certainly was not the best Montreal Alouettes team that we saw out there. And they still saw 298 all-purpose yards, even in those conditions, from Cody Fajardo, and obviously that pair of 100-yard receivers that we talked about earlier in Austin Mack and Kai and Julian Grant. They just didn't have any finish. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. There's one thing that I know about the Montreal Alouettes, and their offense is the most dangerous when they're running the football. If you look back at the last 5 seasons, the Alouettes have finished top 3 in rushing 3 times as a team in those last 5 seasons. Last year, they were only 6th in the league. This year, they are 7th, and only Edmonton and Hamilton, the 2 teams that are not at all committed to running the football, only those 2 teams are worse than Montreal. Even though Montreal's had some success this year, that's an underlying problem with their offense that I'm going to be watching very closely over the next couple of weeks because I want to see that start to turn around. Now, for the BC Lions and Hoof Maron, Vernon Adams. Holy cow. A thoroughly awful quarterback performance from Vernon Adams. And look, I know there's players in this league that watch this show. I know it's weird, but there's players in the CFL that are definitely aware of this show and know who I am, and I believe watch on a weekly basis. If Vernon is one of them, I apologize, I'm a big fan. But just an awful quarterback performance sinks them in a 21-point loss against the Argos. 6 interceptions, including a pick 6 to just put the cherry on top of the turd sundae there. And all but 11 of Toronto's points came directly after or during an interception. All but 11. If you cut half of those, BC might win that game. It was a huge return game for Lions receiver Keon Hatcher. 8 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown in his season debut. A 39-14 pass run split, usually not going to be good enough, and that's what the Lions had in that game. Once again, the game script plays into that a little bit, but look, this was the Lions' second straight matchup against what everyone would consider to be an elite opponent. So you got to be more committed to running the football than that. And Taquan Mazzell has shown this year, even though he got a little banged up in this game, he's shown this year that he has the ability to make plays and make good things happen in the run game. You got to commit to that a little bit more. Lions were also shockingly undisciplined in this game. 13 penalties for 120 yards. It was easily their worst penalty performance of the season, as they had only taken 21 in the 3 previous games up until then. And that just compounds the problem when the quarterback is struggling and making mistakes, which is what Vernon Adams was doing. I honestly don't know why they didn't pull him. After, I would say, maybe interception number 4, I think you got to get him out of there, man. It's not his night. However, you can't bench Vernon Adams for Dane Evans just yet. Like, you can't have Dane Evans, unless Vernon's hurt, you can't have him start this game. This has to be Vernon's game. It's Vernon's team. Nathan Rourke ain't walking through that door. It's Vernon's team. So there's conversation about whether he should be benched or not. The answer to that, objectively, is no. This is the battle of the top 2 statistical secondaries in the CFL. They do a great job at limiting pass yardage, a great job at limiting points on the board, but unlike last week, Vernon Adams is not going to be under the same kind of pressure. The Argos were in his face most of that game. Montreal's only generated 4 sacks on the season. Their pass rush is nowhere near what the Argos pass rush is. It's a very good secondary there in Montreal. Vernon should have every opportunity to make plays, and the Lions should feast when it's their turn on defense. They have 14 quarterback sacks so far this season, and the Alouettes line has allowed 15 in just 3 games. I don't think we're going to see 2 poor performances from Vernon Adams and the Lions in a row. Let's take BC at home to get the win over the Alouettes. On the line here, the Lions are laying 7 points as the home favorite. And you know what? That pass rush thing, I think we're talking about a relatively low-scoring game, one that might not get into the 40s. But even so, I think BC covers this number. I think that pass rush is going to be so deadly. I don't think Montreal's got anything for it. So if they're in the Alouettes' backfield the entire game, this could wind up being a bit of a blowout. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the -7 here on BC. That feels like a strong play to me. Total in the game set at 45.5 points, has already climbed by a point since this line opened. I think this is an under. I think these two defenses are good enough. I think there's a possibility that Lucky Whitehead doesn't play in this game. And if the Lions aren't going to commit to the run game, I think the possibility of points here winds up being a little bit less with how good these two defenses have been so far this year. I think this is an under, so we're going to go under 45.5 points in BC Montreal. Let's go Lions 26, Alouettes 13. We're going to have the Leos double them up. 13-point win. BC wins. They cover the -7 and give me the under. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for week 5 in the CFL. Oh, give me some totals. Please give me some totals. Let's go over the picks here one more time. I've got Saskatchewan beating Edmonton at home 31-20. Take the Riders straight up. Riders -7.5 and give me the over on the 42.5 point total. I've got Winnipeg beating Calgary in Winnipeg by a final score of 23-17, hedging my bets and taking the Stamps plus the 8.5 points in a game that stays under 46.5. I've got the Ottawa REDBLACKS upsetting the Hamilton Ticats 27-20, taking the REDBLACKS +3 in that one in the game that goes over 43.5 points. And I got the BC Lions at home beating the Montreal Alouettes 26-13. Give me the -7 on BC and give me under 45.5 points. Like I mentioned, can't give you my fantasy lineup because Genius Sports literally will not let me. So let's look at some of the players that I'm looking at this week. Really zoning in on Trevor Harris for the start here at quarterback from the Riders. But man, you know what? Depending on the price on Jeremiah Masoli, I might roll Jeremiah Masoli out there, save myself some money, and go deeper on kind of the sexy positions. At running back, Jamal Morrow definitely turned it around last week. Let's see if he continues that. Brady Oliveira, depending on the price. Dedrick Mills, obviously I feel pretty good about as well. He's so involved in that offense. And why not roll out Demontre Tuggle again? He looks like he's going to be the guy, and coming off a big performance, why not roll him out there one more time? In terms of receivers, basically anybody in that Riders receiving core, especially if I do go with Trevor Harris, that would be a nice stack there. Trey Odoms-Dukes, I think, is going to have a big role with the Stamps moving forward. Anybody in that Ottawa receiving core, because again, Jeremiah Masoli can certainly swing the rock and he throws a very catchable ball. So those Ottawa receivers, that might be an option for us there. Tim White or Duke Williams with Hamilton. Again, even though it's going to be Matt Schultz probably, we know that he can sustain those players. The Lions receiving core, especially if we don't have Lucky Whitehead, that's more opportunities for Keon Hatcher, more opportunities for Alexander Hollins. That just leaves defense, and I'm going to be playing value at the defensive position. It's going to be entirely dependent on price. I don't think it's a week where there's a massive amount of points in there. So basically, any of those teams that I think are going to win, or even a couple that I think are going to lose in low-scoring games, whatever's the most economically viable for me, that's the way I'm going to go on the defensive side. There it is, folks. Week 5 episode is now in the books. Once again, my finished fantasy roster will be in the pinned comment down below, or it'll be in the comments somewhere if I've got to pin some other stuff. Again, Genius Sports, please get on the ability to have us be able to set our fantasy rosters sooner than this. Like, the fact that we got to wait until Wednesday, there's not really much need for it. Like, you can churn over faster than that. And the players of CFL Fantasy are certainly going to appreciate you for it. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. I'm praying for some total wins. And I'm praying for a good week for me and for you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the show, the viewership early on this year, and the interaction has been incredible. That's all you guys. Thank you so much for that. It means the world to me. And we'll see you again next week. Actually, we'll see you later this week for my mystery piece of CFL content. See you then.